Let's get into the NFC title game, and there's a bazillion ways you could go, but I was so impressed by both defensive coordinators this weekend. I thought that the approach, and maybe this is just the kiss of death, but I thought that game was over when I saw how many plays and how much time it took Washington to score on their first drive. It was like we saw it in the title game with Notre Dame, their first drive. You saw it even in that Indiana-Ohio State game where it feels like the kiss of death when the underdog team comes in and has this perfectly scripted, perfectly ideal first drive, and then that's about all they have for you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you go on that drive that lasted, I want to say it was like a 8-9 minute drive like that. And you look at something like that, the way like Philadelphia and a lot of these defenses are playing now is they're just simply going to say, if you beat us going 15 yards or 15 plays, I think actually theirs was like 19. But if you go 19 plays and you go down the field on us, good for you. But we're counting that you are going to F up somewhere along those 19 plays, or we're going to make a big play. And that's what they did throughout the course of the game. I think Washington only had maybe one play above 20 yards. Kept everything in front of him. And I actually thought Jaden Daniels, for the most part, played well. I didn't think Jaden Daniels was the issue there in Washington. Far from it. I think you just saw in that game, that was a little bit like what you saw in the college football playoff, where clearly the Commanders deserve to be there, right?
Definitely.
Take nothing away from them.
Absolutely earned their spot in that game.
Those teams are not equal. Outside of Jaden Daniels, like, who really right now appears to be a really special quarterback.
Yeah.
And I know rookie years, like CJ Stroud regressed. You know, we see teams that regress. I would assume that the future is very bright for Daniels and very bright for Washington, but this wasn't. And we even said this going into this game. I can't believe they beat Detroit. I think more of that was a product on, I think Detroit was so beat up and they picked the wrong time to have a 5-turnover game.
That's just it. We knew that they were keeping the defense held together with bubble gum and floss, and then on top of it, they just gave the ball away way too many times.
Yeah, they lost their starting corner, in the first series of that game, and then it spiraled from there. Washington just wasn't, and I thought for 3 quarters they had a good accounting of that, but Philadelphia was just better than Washington. They had better game plan. It was better executed. They were just better across the board, and I thought that Jalen Hurts played his best game. And Philly is 14-3, so let's not act like Philly is somehow of like this little underdog story. Like I said, I think this is the best roster in the NFL. It's the number one rushing attack. It's the number one defense by a lot of metrics, but they're like the 28th or 29th best passing team in the league. When Jalen Hurts has to, and he's not this dynamic runner. That's the other thing. People make Hurts out to be this running quarterback. He's not. Jalen Hurts is not the runner that Jaden Daniels is. He's not the runner that Josh Allen is.
People think he is because he scores a lot of touchdowns and because of the tush push, and frankly, because he's a black quarterback.
Yes.
You're like, oh yeah, but that's not his forte.
It's a lazy narrative. He had 10 carries for 16 yards in this, and again, probably 6 of those are the tush push.
Yeah.
He is not a guy that wants to take the ball down and run. He's just not. He is not a scrambling guy, and I think at times, and Brady even said at the beginning of the game, he holds onto the ball. He has a hard time sometimes deciphering what's going on, and their offense turns into a lot of go balls and just throw the ball up to Smith and A.J. Brown, and that's why you see some of them get frustrated. But when he has the game that he had, and I thought he did a great job of checkdowns, he did a great job of getting the ball out on time. He goes 20-28 for 246. If that is Jalen Hurts, and then you compare that with the best running game in football and that elite offensive line, and look, you can't say enough good things about Saquon Barkley. I mean, look, I know the MVP is going to go to Lamar Jackson, or Josh Allen's going to go to Lamar Jackson. The best player, the most important player is Saquon Barkley. As he goes, that offense goes. And when you combine Saquon Barkley with that defense and you get that Hurts, that can beat the Kansas City Chiefs. That will beat the Kansas City Chiefs. The question is, do we get that Jalen Hurts? Do we get this version of the offense? Because that is the best, this Philly offense, and it's the best that Jalen Hurts has looked all year.
No question.
And now we got Saquon dealing with the calf. He wasn't 100% after the big run. Got 2 weeks. Can this version of Philly show up? Because this version of Philly is scary good. Absolutely scary good. And for Washington, it just, you were playing with house money. You shouldn't have been here. You earned your place there. And I thought, maybe this ends up being if they were to get this game, it would be like when the Falcons got to the Super Bowl with Jamal Anderson, or
sure,
the Carolina Panthers with Jake Delhomme. You see it.
Yep.
You see teams that probably shouldn't be there that go on these runs, And I thought Washington may have a chance of that, but Philly was too much.
Way too much.
And that just, cream of the crop. And now we get the two best teams in football, especially with the Lions and their situation with them being hurt. And I know people aren't necessarily excited about it, but I am. If that version of Philly shows up, I can be stoked for this Super Bowl, because that Eagles team is really, really fun to watch. And what both of these defensive coordinators, two masters in Spags and Fangio, and the defensive talent, especially on the Philly side of the ball, God, they're good.
This text came in earlier on the fan text line, and I thought it was pretty good. They said, do we think the Eagles feel like the Ohio State of the NFL? A very cult-like following. 1 week the fans want to fire their head coach. The next they're going to try to win the championship. It feels like there's been so much negativity around Sirianni and control. I mean, they were infighting coaches on the sideline like 2 months ago, and yet here they are. It feels like they just find a way to get there, and like they should have been maybe playing more like this all along. But if they're just putting this together now and there's more of it, yeah, the Chiefs might be in trouble.
I can see that. I can see that comparison. But Philly really hasn't had, the one loss at the beginning of the year by 1 to Atlanta, and they lost to the Buccaneers. That one was pretty ugly. And then the Commanders got him 36-33, toward the end. It took a while for Fangio's defense to really gain traction. And when DeJean and Cooper really kind of rounded into form, remember those two, and Quinton Mitchell, Quinyon Mitchell, like they're rookie defensive backs.
Yeah.
They have really, really rounded into form, and they had a phenomenal game. And so I think as they've really kind of grown and developed, and you've added Cooper DeJean to Mitchell, who started the year and has been phenomenal, and then you've seen kind of the Nakobe Deans and the Nolan Smiths kind of take that next step to go along with the best defensive tackle in football right now, Jalen Carter.
He's so good, man.
So the defense has really come along, and then the passing game, the run game has been there all year, the dominant offensive line. It's just the passing game. And I honestly, I don't know. I don't think the passing game, like the Ohio State one, like you said, like kind of the switch got flipped. I don't know if the switch got flipped.
No, but it looked as good as it has.
That's why that's the thing that scares me.
Yeah.
If the old Philly passing, you will not beat the Chiefs with the 29th best passing attack. You won't beat them just throwing goal balls up and throwing 12 passes. You're not just going to run it down Kansas City's throat and just, play kind of this bully ball thing. I don't think that will happen. So against that Spags defense and all the looks he's able to throw, can Hurts play that way? Remember a couple years ago in the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts played the best game of his life. Like, he was the reason that Philly should have won that game.
Yeah.
But their defense couldn't hold up their end of the bargain.
Right.
I think this Philly defense can. I think it can hold up its end of the bargain. I think it's going to be on the other side of things. Because that they're going to sell out to try to stop Saquon Barkley, and I don't know if you can stop him, but you can probably slow him down. And at some point, Jalen Hurts, against some of those creative Spag looks, is going to have to stand in the pocket, figure some stuff out, find the open guy, and then deliver the ball on time. Can he do that?
And that's what I'm excited about, is that chess match, because I don't know that Washington had the dudes or the scheme to really force him into more trouble, but I feel like the Chiefs might. And so that matchup, Hurts versus Spagnuolo and the Chiefs defense, I'm really excited for. I'm excited for the other side of things, too, because Vic Fangio's been doing some magic. I mean, you mentioned how good some of those guys are on the defensive side of the ball for the Eagles. They're making it work with rookies. They're making it work with veterans. And they're making it work with some cast-offs like Bond. And guys that other people didn't want have been turned into Pro Bowl caliber players. What did you see from the defensive unit that at least helped slow down Washington on Saturday? Because we noted that Washington hung with them for a while there.
Yeah.
The score not necessarily indicative of as close as the game was for most of it, but that defense for Philly slowed down slowed down Washington in a way that we haven't seen this playoffs yet.
Well, first off, they took away the run game completely, and we've seen it this year when Washington has gotten bogged down. It's simply because if you take away their run game, I'm not going to say that like Daniels is really special, but you take any quarterback and you take away his run game, and I think they limited them to, I think what I'm looking here, I want to, outside of Jaden Daniels scrambling. Yeah, Brian Robinson, 11 carries, 36 yards. Eckler, 8 carries, 15 yards. So again, make them one-dimensional. You take away the run game. And I thought Philly looked at that and they said to the Commanders, where does Daniels most struggle? Again, reading defenses, putting it over the middle of the field. They took away the go stuff. They tried to take away the outside. And you're not going to completely stop Washington. Daniels and McLaurin are really special players, and Zach Ertz had a great game. But again, I just thought Philly had a great game plan of, you're not going to run the ball on us, and you're not going to get over the top. You will beat us going down the field. And by the way,
and that's part of why Ertz had a great game,
yes,
is because that was their choice.
That was their choice.
Like, yeah.
And you look at those turnovers, a lot of those were forced turnovers. The Eckler one was a great punch out. I mean, that is a Philly defense that is going for that ball. And that's what I love about Philadelphia and what I love about Kansas City. I know some people are kind of poo-pooing this and like, oh my God, we don't like either one of these teams. Like, we've seen this before. I don't. I'm excited. Even though I don't particularly root for either one of these teams, this is excellence on both sides of the ball. I think if you were to say that there was one weak link, it's Jalen Hurts. And that's the part that's scary. You would think that in a game that you could, the Philly defense greater than, right? It's better than the Kansas City defense.
Yeah.
But the Kansas City defense just shows up time and time again, right? We look at Philadelphia and you say from the outside, from the running back and the skilled players, running back and receivers, clearly advantage Philadelphia, right? But then you look at the quarterback, the most important position in the game. And we saw this, Josh Allen versus Pat Mahomes. That's true greatness. Mahomes slightly better than Allen, right? And now we look at Hurts and we look at Mahomes, and I think Andy Reid and that offense versus Philly, that is that enough to overcome, I think, the talent level difference than Philadelphia. And so I just
it does feel like there's way more talent. When it's Philly defense versus KC offense, there's more talent on the Philly side. It's a question of, can the KC offense scheme well enough to beat that talent?
Yeah, and so I just think this is a really, really I think it's a really, really fun X's and O matchup, and there's going to be some wrinkles. Because both teams, are going to be ready, but like Andy Reid with a couple weeks to prepare is terrifying. I thought that was the best Kansas City's offense has looked. Remember, this Kansas City offense, I think, has only scored 30 points twice. Once was against like the Carolina Panthers, and I think they may have done it against the Bucks. This is not like this super high-flying offense that that you think about when you think about Mahomes.
No, and that's the thing is, that's the biggest discrepancy from where this dynasty started. When they had Kelsey in his prime, Tyreek Hill in his prime, and dudes running all over the field. Now it's like, it's not exactly bubblegum and floss, but they are piecemealing some of that together too.
But when you look at Kansas City and the game plan they had, I thought their offense was phenomenal against Buffalo's. And you saw that early on. And Buffalo made some adjustments in the second half and we were able to slow them down. But, I mean, give Kansas City credit for, they're doing this with a washed-up DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep.
A cast-off Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yep, maybe washed up as well.
Kelsey, who didn't really have it. He had a big game last week. Didn't have a big game this one.
And hasn't had a big season.
Doing it without a real feature back, they found a way to get Kareem Hunt to somehow revert back to old.
Somehow Hunt and Pacheco have been like just enough.
Xavier Worthy, who didn't do a ton all year, has now kind of developed into this kind of fun little.
He's like a reliable slot option for them.
Yeah, and he's become kind of this fun little gadget player, not necessarily the deep threat. So, and they've kind of, and they're dealing with their own offensive line issues. They shuffled their all-pro left guard. They moved him out to tackle. But ultimately, when you have Andy Reid and you have 15 back there, it's just they find a way to make things happen. And I just thought it was interesting that in the biggest game of the year, I thought their offense looked as good as it's looked all year, whereas Buffalo kind of came out tentative and a little slow. And Philly, at the same way. Philly came out with an offense that it certainly had problems, and right from the get-go, Barkley breaks the big, touchdown run, and then after that, Hurts comes out, starts throwing dimes, starts slinging around, and I think you just have two teams playing their best at the right time. And if those title game performances are any indication of what we're going to get in the Super Bowl, dude, sign me up for it. Let's go.
You mentioned how good Andy Reid is when he has extra time to prepare. 21-4 in his career, coming off an extra week. That is the best in NFL history.
Yeah, and I expect. To me, if I were to take one thing that would scare me if I'm an Eagles fan, it's Hurts in that offense against Spags. In crucial moments, we have now seen multiple years in a row. We talked about it, the 4th and 4th and 5 play, that basically ended the game
Yep.
for Buffalo, right? The mug look and the Dalton Kincaid miscatch, right? Go look at that play and look at the one that ended the Super Bowl last year with the 49ers. Mugged pressure look, bailout, confuses an offensive line, get pressure on a quarterback. Thanks for coming. Game over, Kansas City, right? That was against Brock Purdy, and that was against Josh Allen. And Josh Allen is as good as anyone in football. I think Brock Purdy is very, very smart pre-snap.
Hard to confuse, generally.
Hard to confuse. And Jalen Hurts, on the other hand, is someone that really struggles, I think, with pre-snap recognition. He struggles with when you show him one thing and give him another. They were even talking about in the game a little bit that when you get a lot of these teams that bail at the snap and he has to readjust on the fly to what he sees.
Kind of his count and where guys are.
That can be really problematic. And with 2 weeks to prepare, I want to say Philly can do this, but it scares the living daylights out of me that in big moments, I think this will be a close game. In big moments, 3rd and 4th downs, when I got Spags
Forces you to pucker.
when I got him dialing something up against Philly, that's really scary. And maybe Saquon Barkley's enough. Maybe their ability to just run the ball and keep Kansas City honest, maybe that's enough. But that's the biggest matchup. If I had to, like, my way too early, circle this, and that decides the game, there's going to be 4 or 5 3rd or 4th downs where he's going to come up with a unique kind of pressure look. Can Hurts figure it out, solve it? The other thing, too, is this offensive line that Philly has is much better than some of these other lines. It's going to be harder to confuse them, but gosh, he's a master. He makes a lot of O-lines and a lot of quarterbacks look silly. That's a big mismatch. That's an absolute mismatch in this game. But I don't know if America's excited about this, but I think you are getting 2 elite football teams.
And that's the thing is, I'm not somebody who's going to complain because it's a matchup we've seen before. I want the 2 best teams to play, and it seems like that's what we're getting at the end of this postseason. Nobody got lucky being here. Feels like the teams that are supposed to be here are going to be here, and now you have some of the best coaching minds and best players in the game going head-to-head. It's hard to ask for anything more.
Yeah, and someone's saying, like, is Philly going to spy Mahomes? I do think that they've have the ability with their defensive line and their athletic guys that can run around. I do think this Philly defense is going to be able to contain Kansas City. And again, go watch Kansas City this year. It's a good offense. It is not a team that's putting up like silly numbers. There's not. It's a good offense with Patrick Mahomes, but it's an offense that you can hold down. And I think Philly's defense can hold them down. I think that is going to be a matchup problem for Kansas City on that side of the ball.